Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. How many of you out there know deep down that you're meant for more? How many of you have felt that hunger inside, that voice that says, this isn't it? I'm capable of so much more than this. That's not a random thought. That's your spirit. That's your destiny calling you. Now listen closely. Getting what you want is not about luck. It's not about being born into the right family. It's not about waiting for someone to come save you. Getting what you want is about taking control. The first step, decide. Decision is power. The moment you decide, really decide that you will not settle for less than you deserve, everything changes. Most people tiptoe through life hoping to avoid pain. The few who create extraordinary lives, they charge forward with absolute clarity. The second step, raise your standards. You don't get in life what you want. You get what you're willing to tolerate. If you tolerate average, you'll live average. But the second you demand excellence from yourself, your brain finds a way to rise to that level. The third step, massive action. Not someday. Not when I feel ready. Action now. Momentum is the secret weapon of the achiever. Start imperfectly, fail fast, adjust, and keep moving forward. Consistent, relentless action destroys fear. And the last step, change your state. Every breakthrough begins when you step out of the energy of doubt and into the energy of certainty. You've got to put yourself in a peak state, mentally, emotionally, physically. Because when you're in the right state, you make the right decisions, you follow through, and you dominate obstacles. So here's my challenge to you. Stop negotiating with your limitations. Stop telling yourself stories about why you can't. Decide today what you truly want. Raise your standards, commit to relentless action, and put yourself in a state of absolute certainty. Do that, and you can get anything you want. Now say it with me. Anything is possible if I decide it is. Most people drift through life without ever making a true decision. They think they're deciding when really they're just hoping, wishing, waiting for circumstances to line up. A real decision isn't something you talk about. It isn't something you put on your vision board and then forget about. A real decision cuts off every other option. It's the moment when you say to yourself, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, this is where I'm going, and nothing less will ever be acceptable again. That moment changes everything, because when you truly decide, your brain and your body reorganize themselves to serve that decision. Suddenly, what looked like impossible obstacles start to look like puzzles you can solve, and what once seemed out of reach becomes inevitable. Think about it. Every breakthrough in history, every massive achievement, every story of someone who transformed their life, it all started with a decision. Not a wish, not a dream, a decision. Somebody drew a line in the sand and said, this is it. I will no longer tolerate where I am. I will create something different, and I will make it real no matter what it takes. That's the difference between the majority who settle and the few who create. The masses dabble in desires, the few live by decisions. And here's the truth: clarity creates power. When you are unclear, when you don't know exactly what you want, when your desires are vague, your life stays vague. If you say, I want to be successful, your brain has no target. Success means a million different things. If you say, I want more money, and someone hands you $5, technically you got what you asked for. Vague desires bring vague results. But when you lock in with crystal clarity, when you decide, not hope, not wish, but decide that you will earn this much, build this business, transform this body, repair this relationship, experience this level of freedom, your brain goes to work like a guided missile. It searches, it hunts, it finds the path. The human nervous system is built to serve decisions. Now, some people wait to decide until they feel ready. That's the trap. You don't wait for certainty to arrive before deciding. Certainty comes from deciding. You want to feel confident. You want to feel strong. You want to feel like you can handle it. But the only way to feel that is to commit first. Think about when you learned to walk. As a baby, you didn't sit there waiting to feel confident. You didn't crawl around thinking, one day when I'm ready, when the stars align, I'll stand up and try. No, you stood up, you fell, you got hurt, you stood again, and eventually your body figured it out. Decision precedes certainty. The moment you decide, the resources appear, the confidence grows, the path reveals itself. But most people never make that decision. Why? Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of what others will think. So they hedge their bets. They play it safe. They keep one foot in and one foot out. They say, I'll try. And the word try destroys destiny. To try is to give yourself permission not to follow through. To try is to say, I'm not fully committed. I'm testing the waters. But life doesn't reward half-hearted commitments. Life responds to the person who decides with absolute conviction, the person who burns the boats, the person who eliminates plan B. Think about your own life right now. Where are you undecided? Where are you still wavering between two paths? Still stuck in hesitation? Still playing small because you haven't drawn a line in the sand. Maybe it's your career. You know you hate your job, but you haven't decided to pursue what lights you up. Maybe it's your health. You know you need to change, but you haven't decided that you're done living with low energy. Maybe it's your finances. You keep saying you'll get out of debt. You'll save, you'll invest, but you haven't decided with the kind of clarity that forces your actions to match your words. Every area of your life right now reflects your decisions or your lack of them. Decision is power because it compresses time. Some people take years, even decades, to decide what they want. They keep circling, they keep overthinking, they keep waiting for the perfect moment. The truth is, indecision is the thief of progress. The moment you decide, you cut through all the noise and your energy is instantly concentrated. A person who has decided has more power than 100 people who are still thinking about it. That kind of certainty is magnetic. It attracts people, opportunities, and solutions because everyone and everything gravitates toward conviction. Clarity is also about alignment. When your decision is clear, your emotions line up behind it, your focus sharpens, and your daily actions fall into place. But when you lack clarity, your emotions are scattered, your actions are inconsistent, and your energy leaks into 1,000 directions. That's why some people work so hard and see so little progress. They're running in circles without a clear decision to drive them forward. The moment you decide with clarity, all that scattered energy channels into one focused direction and results start to compound. We've all had those moments, haven't we? A moment where you just knew. Maybe you decided to end a relationship that was wrong for you. Maybe you decided to quit a job that was draining you. Maybe you decided to start something new. And even though you had no idea how it would work out, you felt that rush of energy, that sense of alignment. That's the magic of decision. Suddenly you're alive again. Suddenly you're moving forward. Suddenly your whole physiology shifts because your mind is locked onto a new target. Now, here's the kicker. It's not enough to decide once. Life demands that we decide again and again every single day. You don't decide to be healthy one day and then stop. You don't decide to grow your business one time and then coast. Decision is a practice, a discipline. You reinforce it by recommitting daily, by taking the actions that align with it, by refusing to let your old habits pull you back into indecision. The moment you stop deciding, you start drifting, and drifting is death to dreams. That's why clarity must be renewed constantly. Every morning, you remind yourself, here's who I am, here's what I've decided, here's the standard I live by. Every night, you reflect, did I honor my decision today, or did I betray it? That self-honesty is what keeps you on track. Decision is the ultimate power because it transforms your identity. Once you decide at a deep level, you stop acting like someone who hopes, and you start acting like someone who is. A person who has decided to be fit doesn't see working out as optional. It's who they are. A person who has decided to be successful doesn't see effort as negotiable. It's who they are. A person who has decided to create impact doesn't wait for permission. They show up and deliver because it's who they are. Identity follows decision and destiny follows identity. Every result in your life right now is a reflection of your standards. Not your hopes, not your wishes, not the goals you wrote down on New Year's Eve, your standards. Because we don't always get what we want, but we always get what we're willing to settle for. If your standard is to just get by, then you'll find a way to survive, but never thrive. If your standard is to have energy, strength, and vitality, you will not allow yourself to stay in a body that feels heavy and sluggish. If your standard is to create wealth, you will not tolerate being broke month after month. You will find a way to break through. Everything in life comes down to the invisible thermostat you've set for yourself. And that thermostat is your standard. Think about it. People don't rise to their goals. They fall to their standards. You can set a goal to earn $1 million, but if your standard is to scrape by it just enough to cover bills, then the first obstacle that shows up will knock you back into what you tolerate. You can set a goal to get in shape. But if your standard is, I work out when I feel like it, then you're done before you even start. Standards are like gravity. They always pull you back to what you've accepted as normal for yourself. The only way to change your life permanently is to raise what you demand from yourself. The problem is that most people set their standards based on what's comfortable, not what's possible. They look around, see what their friends and coworkers are doing, and then settle for the same. If everyone around them is overweight, being 20 pounds overweight feels normal. If everyone around them is stuck in debt, living paycheck to paycheck feels normal. If everyone around them is unfulfilled, complaining about their jobs, that misery feels normal. But normal is not the same as natural. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's acceptable. Your standard has to come from your vision, not from your environment. When you raise your standards, something inside of you shifts. Suddenly, what you used to tolerate becomes unbearable. The junk food that you once craved starts to look like poison when your standard is energy and health. The toxic relationship that you once made excuses for becomes intolerable when your standard is love and respect. The job that drains you, the paycheck that limits you, the excuses that once felt comfortable, when you raise your standard, they no longer have a place in your life. And that's the point. Change doesn't stick until you raise your standard high enough that the old way becomes impossible. We've all had those moments where raising our standards changed everything. Maybe you remember a time when you finally said, enough. Enough of being broke, enough of being out of shape, enough of being treated poorly, enough of playing small. The second you made that decision, you didn't just set a goal. You created a new identity. You weren't someone trying to improve anymore. You were someone who demanded more from yourself. And in that instant, your behaviors began to shift to match the new standard. That's the power of demand. This is why two people can face the same obstacle and one person gives up while the other person breaks through. It's not about intelligence or talent. It's about standards. For the person with low standards, the obstacle is an excuse. For the person with high standards, the obstacle is fuel. They both feel the pain, they both face the challenge, but one has decided, I don't stop until I win. And the other has decided, as long as I tried, it's okay. And those two standards create completely different lives. You want to know why people don't change. It's not because change is hard. It's because they never made not changing unbearable. As long as you're comfortable in the pain, as long as you're okay with being mediocre, you'll never step up. The second you raise your standards so high that your current reality feels unacceptable, change becomes automatic. You don't need willpower when your standard demands action. You don't need motivation when your standard screams, I refuse to live like this. Now, raising your standards is not about comparing yourself to others. It's about comparing yourself to who you know you could be. Deep down, every person alive knows they are capable of more. They know they're settling. They know they're avoiding the work. They know they're hiding from the truth. But the moment you raise your standard, you close the gap between who you are and who you're meant to be. And that gap is where all your frustration lies. Raise the standard, live up to it, and that frustration turns into pride, fulfillment, and momentum. Some people think raising your standards means being harsh or unrealistic. It's not about being perfect. It's about refusing to settle for less than you're capable of. If your standard is honesty, you don't tolerate lying to yourself anymore. If your standard is growth, you don't allow years to pass by without learning and expanding. If your standard is impact, you don't hide your voice, you don't silence yourself, you don't play small to make other people comfortable. Raising your standards is about living in alignment with the highest vision of yourself. But here's the catch. Raising your standards means raising your responsibility. You can't say, I demand more, and then keep making excuses. You can't say, I demand more, and then keep blaming others. The second you raise your standard, you're declaring ownership. You're saying, if it's going to change, it's up to me. That level of responsibility scares people, and that's why most never step into it. They would rather keep their low standards and stay comfortable than demand more and hold themselves accountable. But comfort is the slow death of potential. The truth is, life pays you in proportion to your standards. If your standard is minimum wage effort, you'll get minimum wage rewards. If your standard is to only give when it's easy, you'll only receive when it's convenient. But if your standard is to give your best no matter what, if your standard is to go all in, if your standard is to demand excellence from yourself, life responds in kind. It may not pay you instantly, but it will pay you inevitably. High standards compound over time. They create habits. They shape identity. They attract people and opportunities who operate at the same level. Take a look at your environment right now. The people you surround yourself with reflect your standards. If you raise your standards and the people around you don't, there will be tension. Some will rise with you. Others will try to pull you back down. That's natural. But if you truly raise your standards, you will no longer have tolerance for relationships that drain you, conversations that lower you, or environments that keep you small. You will outgrow them, and that's part of the process. Don't fear it. Embrace it. The moment you raise your standards, you stop negotiating with mediocrity. You stop saying it's okay if I don't. You stop bargaining with yourself about whether you'll follow through. When your standards rise, your choices become simpler because anything below your standard is not an option anymore. It's like oxygen. You don't debate whether or not you'll breathe today. You just do it because it's non-negotiable. That's what a real standard is. It's not something you try to live up to. It's something you refuse to live without. Nothing happens until you take action. You can read every book, attend every seminar, visualize, meditate, and journal about your dreams. But until you take action, it's all fantasy. Action is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It's the difference between the life you imagine and the life you live. And not just any action, massive, relentless action. Because small, hesitant moves rarely create breakthroughs. It's the person who goes all in, who pushes beyond comfort, who refuses to stop after the first setback. That person is the one who transforms their reality. Fear exists in the absence of movement. When you sit still, when you hesitate, when you overthink, fear grows bigger and stronger. You imagine worst case scenarios. You talk yourself out of opportunities. You shrink your vision to match your doubt. But the second you move, the second you take a step, the second you act in spite of fear, the fear starts to die. Fear cannot survive momentum. Fear feeds on hesitation, but momentum feeds on itself. That's why the moment you act, even imperfectly, your confidence grows. The most successful people in the world are not the ones without fear. They are the ones who act faster than their fear can talk them out of it. Think about the times in your life when you felt unstoppable. Was it because everything was perfect, or was it because you were moving so fast that nothing could catch you? When you're in momentum, you don't have time to question yourself. You don't have time to doubt. You're too busy executing, learning, adjusting, moving forward. Momentum creates certainty. Momentum creates clarity. Momentum creates results. People who lack confidence think they need certainty before they act. But confidence is built by acting without certainty and discovering your own strength in the process. Massive action is about doing what most people won't. Most people dabble. They try something for a week, then stop when it gets tough. They post a few times online and quit when they don't go viral. They go to the gym for a month and quit when the scale doesn't move fast enough. They want instant results. But the world doesn't reward dabblers. It rewards the relentless. Massive action means you keep going when it's boring, when it's hard, when it's inconvenient, when nobody's cheering, when nobody's watching. It means you refuse to stop because you've decided that stopping is not an option. And here's the truth. Massive action isn't about doing one thing perfectly. It's about doing many things consistently until you find what works. You don't wait to have the perfect strategy. You don't wait until you've figured everything out. You act, you fail, you learn, you adjust, and then you act again. Success is built on a mountain of imperfect actions. People who demand perfection before they move never move. People who are willing to act massively and relentlessly, even when it's messy, eventually find the path. Momentum is your ally. Once you start, it's easier to keep going. That's why starting is often the hardest part. The first workout feels hard, but the second is easier, the third easier still. And before long, it's part of who you are. The first call to a client feels terrifying. The 10th feels natural. The 100th feels effortless. The first video you post feels awkward. The 15th feels confident. The secret is to never let momentum die. Because when momentum dies, fear creeps back and doubt grows louder and resistance tightens its grip. People overestimate what they can do in a day, but underestimate what they can do in a year of relentless action. One day of effort won't change your life, but a year of massive, consistent action will transform everything. The compound effect is real, and it's only activated when you refuse to stop. That's why relentless action matters more than intense, short bursts. Anyone can sprint for a week. Very few keep running for months, for years, for decades. But those who do build a life so far beyond what they imagine that people call them lucky. It's not luck. It's relentlessness. When you act massively, you attract attention. Opportunities come to those who are visible, not those who are hiding, waiting, preparing forever. Action puts you on the radar. Action makes people notice. Action creates momentum not just in you, but in the world around you. Suddenly doors open that were invisible before. People offer support, never would have noticed you otherwise, and resources flow because you've proven through your actions that you're serious. The world doesn't respond to what you think about doing. It responds to what you do and do again. The mind loves to complicate things. It says, wait until you're ready. Wait until you're perfect. Wait until the timing is right. But the truth is, action creates readiness. Action creates clarity. Action creates timing. Nothing moves until you move. Waiting is the enemy of progress. You could spend years planning and you'll still be in the same place. Or you can act massively for a year, fail 100 times, learn 100 lessons, and end up 10 years ahead of where you would have been. Relentless action also builds resilience. When you take massive action, you get used to failure. You stop fearing it. You see failure as feedback, not as final. Every time you fail, you adapt, you grow tougher, you sharpen your skills. You become the kind of person who doesn't crumble at rejection, who doesn't quit when it's inconvenient, who doesn't slow down because the path is bumpy. Relentless action turns you into someone unshakable because you know nothing can stop you if you refuse to stop yourself. People often ask, what's the secret to success? The secret is there is no secret. It's massive, relentless action. That's it. Every skill, every opportunity, every resource, every connection you need will show up along the way if you're moving. But they will never show up if you sit still, waiting for life to hand you something. Life rewards the doers. Life bends for the relentless. Life pays back the one who refuses to quit. Look at anyone who has achieved greatness, and you will see someone who acted more than others. They weren't necessarily smarter. They weren't necessarily more talented, but they were relentless. They knocked on more doors. They made more calls. They put in more reps. They wrote more drafts. They launched more attempts. They acted more and more and more. That's why they created more. Action is the equalizer. You may not control your background, your resources, or your starting point, but you control how much action you take. You control whether you sit still or you move. You control whether you give up after the first obstacle or keep going until you find a way. And in the end, the person who takes relentless action outpaces the one who sits waiting for inspiration, talent, or luck. Action beats talent when talent refuses to act. Massive action also rewires your brain. Each time you act, your nervous system learns, adapts, and grows stronger. What once felt impossible becomes natural. What once terrified you becomes routine. The brain adapts to whatever you do consistently. If you consistently hesitate, your brain learns hesitation. If you consistently act, your brain learns certainty. That's how relentless action transforms not just your results, but your identity. Your state is everything. The way you feel in a given moment determines the decisions you make, the actions you take, and the results you get. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you're in a lousy state, tired, fearful, doubtful, uncertain, you won't execute it, you'll hesitate, you'll procrastinate, you'll talk yourself out of it. But if you're in a peak state, confident, strong, certain, alive, you'll find a way to win even with an imperfect strategy. That's why some people with less knowledge, less experience, less advantage still outperform those who seem to have it all. They mastered their state. They learned how to put themselves into the energy of certainty no matter what. Every single one of us has been in both places. You've had moments where you felt unstoppable, like everything you touched turned to gold, where you spoke and people listened, where you acted and things lined up. You've also had moments where you felt stuck, drained, powerless, like nothing worked no matter what you tried. The difference wasn't the world outside you, it was the state you were in. The same opportunity looks like a door when you're in a powerful state and looks like a wall when you're in a weak state. The same challenge feels like an adventure when you're in a strong state and feels like a burden when you're in a weak one. The state you live in determines the reality you experience. Most people let their state be controlled by circumstance. If something good happens, they feel good. If something bad happens, they feel bad. They ride the roller coaster of life with no control over their emotions. But the truth is, your state is not given to you by the world. It's created by you. You control it through your focus, your language, and your physiology. What you focus on determines what you feel. The meaning you give things through your language shapes your emotions. And the way you move your body, your breathing, your posture, your intensity instantly shifts your energy. Master these three, and you can master your state in any situation. Focus is the first lever. Wherever focus goes, energy flows. If you focus on what's missing, you'll feel empty. If you focus on what's wrong, you'll feel hopeless. If you focus on what you can't control, you'll feel powerless. But if you focus on what's possible, if you focus on what's good, if you focus on what you can control right now, your state instantly changes. Focus is like a magnifying glass. It makes things bigger. Most people magnify their problems and shrink their possibilities. You need to flip that. Magnify your possibilities until they overwhelm your problems. Magnify your strengths until they dwarf your weaknesses. Magnify your vision until it pulls you forward. Language is the second lever. The words you use shape the meaning you give to events. Two people can experience the same situation, and one says, this is the end, while the other says, this is the beginning. One says, I failed. The other says, I learned. One says, this is crushing me. The other says, this is building me. The words you habitually use to describe your life become the emotions you habitually feel. Change your language, and you change your state. Stop saying you're stressed, and start saying you're challenged. Stop saying you're exhausted, and start saying you're recharging. Stop saying you're stuck and start saying you're preparing for your next move. The brain listens to your words, feed it certainty, and it gives you certainty back. Physiology is the third lever, and it's the fastest way to change your state. Your body and your emotions are linked. If you slump your shoulders, lower your head, breathe shallow, and move slowly, your body is telling your brain to feel tired, weak, uncertain. But if you stand tall, breathe deeply, move with power, and speak with strength, your body tells your brain to feel confident and alive. This is why athletes warm up with intensity before performing. They're priming their state through their physiology. You can do the same anytime. Shift your body, and your mind will follow. Energy is a decision you make moment to moment. People say they don't have energy, but what they really don't have is a compelling state. Energy comes from motion, focus, and purpose. When you know why you're doing something, when you're moving your body with intensity, when you're focused on possibility instead of problems, energy flows through you. That's why you can be physically tired, but still find energy to do something you're excited about. Energy isn't just physical. It's emotional, mental, spiritual. And when you master generating it, you stop being a victim of fatigue and start being the creator of vitality. Certainty is the foundation of all achievement. If you don't believe you can do something, you won't commit fully. If you don't commit fully, you won't take the necessary action. And if you don't take the necessary action, you won't get the result. But certainty is not about knowing exactly how everything will work out. Certainty is about trusting yourself no matter what happens. It's about saying, I may not know how, but I will find a way. That inner certainty creates outer results because it drives you to act boldly and consistently. When you live in uncertainty, you hesitate, you second guess yourself, you make weak moves. But when you live in certainty, you move with conviction. You make decisions faster. You commit deeper. You inspire others because certainty is contagious. People follow leaders who project certainty, not because those leaders always know the exact path, but because they radiate the belief that together they'll figure it out. Certainty turns ordinary people into leaders and turns leaders into legends. The fastest way to kill fear is to enter a state of certainty. Fear is nothing more than a state of doubt, a state of imagining worst-case scenarios. You shift out of it by focusing differently, speaking differently, moving differently. Fear is a pattern, not a prison. Change the pattern and you break free. The person who masters their state can feel fear but instantly shift into courage. They can feel doubt, but instantly shift into certainty. They can feel overwhelmed, but instantly shift into focus. That's what separates the average from the extraordinary. Mastering your state doesn't mean you'll never feel low, tired, or doubtful again. It means you don't stay there. You catch it faster, you change it faster. You refuse to let a bad moment become a bad day, or a bad day become a bad week, or a bad week become a bad life. The average person waits for their state to change on its own. The master of state creates the change intentionally, immediately, consistently. When you live in a powerful state, you make different choices. You approach opportunities with confidence instead of hesitation. You attack problems with creativity instead of fear. You speak with authority instead of apology. You keep going when others quit. You don't just react to life, you direct life. Your state becomes the fuel that drives your decisions, your actions, your results. And over time, the quality of your state determines the quality of your destiny. Every limitation you have right now is a story you keep telling yourself. It's not the truth, it's a narrative. You say, I can't because I don't have enough money. I can't because I don't have the right connections. I can't because of my past. I can't because I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm not ready. I'm not educated enough. I don't have the time. All of it is a story. And the moment you accept it as truth, it becomes the prison you live in. The chains aren't real, but you tighten them around yourself every time you repeat that story. People think they're limited by circumstances, but they're really limited by the meaning they've given those circumstances. Two people can face the exact same challenge, and one sees it as a dead end. The other sees it as the beginning of something new. One says, this is proof I can't. The other says, this is proof I must. It's not the circumstance that shapes their destiny. It's the story they attach to it. Your story is the lens through which you interpret reality, and if the story is weak, the life will be weak. If the story is strong, the life will be strong. Negotiating with your limitations is the biggest way people sabotage their potential. You know what negotiating with limitations looks like? It's when you start justifying why you're not where you want to be. You say, I'm too busy right now. I'll start later. This isn't the right season. I'll wait until things settle down. I've already tried. It didn't work. So maybe it's not for me. Those are deals you're making with your own limitations. Every time you agree to them, you lower your standard. You shrink your vision. You train your brain to accept less. And once you start negotiating, it never ends. You give in once, and the limitation grows stronger. You keep giving in, And one day you wake up living a life so small you don't even recognize yourself. The truth is, problem. People don't fail because they lack resources. They fail because they lack resourcefulness. They don't fail because they don't have enough. They fail because they believe they're not enough. But history is filled with people who had no resources, no support, no privilege, and yet they broke through because they refused to accept their limitations as final. They created a new story, and that story gave them the strength to act in ways most people wouldn't. Your story determines how much energy you bring, how much courage you summon, how much action you take. Your brain is always looking for alignment. If you say, I'm not the kind of person who succeeds, your brain will sabotage your success to make sure your life matches that story. If you say, I always mess things up, you'll unconsciously create situations where you mess things up. If you say, I don't deserve it, you'll find ways to push it away. The brain doesn't care if your story empowers you or destroys you. It just works to keep you consistent with what you believe. That's why changing your story is non-negotiable. Until you stop telling yourself weak stories, you'll keep living a weak life. So many people tell stories of limitation because they're addicted to certainty. It's easier to say, I can't, than to step into the unknown. If you say, I can't because I'm too old, you've already written the ending of your story, and even though it's painful, at least it's predictable. If you say, I can't because I don't know how, you've given yourself an excuse to stay comfortable. People cling to limitations because they'd rather feel certain in failure than risk uncertainty and possibility. But if you want a bigger life, you've got to let go of the certainty of your limitations and step into the uncertainty of your potential. Every breakthrough begins with killing the old story. That's the turning point. You stop saying, I can't, and you start saying, I must. You stop saying, it's impossible. And you start saying, it's inevitable if I don't quit. You stop saying, that's just who I am, and you start saying, this is who I decide to be. That shift in story creates a shift in identity, and identity drives behavior. When your story changes, the way you show up changes. When the way you show up changes, your results change. It all starts with the story. Negotiating with limitations is also how people play small to protect themselves. They say, I don't want too much. I just want to be comfortable. That's another way of saying, I'm afraid to want more because I might fail. They say, I'll settle for this relationship even though I'm not truly happy because at least I won't be alone. That's another way of saying, I'd rather accept pain I know than risk joy I don't. They say, I'll stick to this job I hate because at least it pays the bills. That's another way of saying, I'm too afraid to test what I'm capable of. Every limitation you negotiate with becomes a ceiling, and the more you accept them, the lower your ceiling becomes. But limitations aren't real until you accept them. They're suggestions, not laws. They're ideas, not facts. And when you decide to stop negotiating, to stop giving in, to stop letting those stories run your life, everything shifts. The person who refuses to accept limitations becomes unstoppable because they always find another way. They don't care how many times it takes, how many obstacles are in the way, how many people doubt them. Their story is, I will not be denied, and life eventually bends to that level of certainty. You've done this before. Think back to a time when you broke through a limitation. Maybe you thought you couldn't make it through school, but you did. Maybe you thought you couldn't survive heartbreak, but you did. Maybe you thought you couldn't achieve something, but you did. How did it happen? You changed the story. You went from I can't to I must, from I don't know how to I'll figure it out, from it's impossible to watch me. And the moment you changed that story, you found strength, creativity, and resilience you didn't know you had. The story you live in becomes the reality you live out. If your story is about limitations, your reality will be limited. If your story is about possibilities, your reality will expand. People who succeed at extraordinary levels aren't living without problems. They're living with better stories. Their story is, I can find a way. I can figure it out. I can grow. I can overcome. That story fuels them when others quit. That story pulls them forward when others stay stuck. That story creates momentum when others are paralyzed. When you stop negotiating with limitations, you stop waiting for permission. You stop asking, can I? And you start declaring, I will. You stop looking for proof you can and start providing proof you won't quit. Limitations lose their power the second you refuse to accept them as your truth. And the moment you decide to live in a stronger story, your energy rises, your actions multiply, your certainty hardens, and your results explode.